I had been off the plane for maybe 20 minutes when the cold Denver air hit me harder than the 9-month deployment I'd just survived. I've done enough Navy deployments to know the difference between relief and exhaustion, and this was the sweet middle ground where you're too tired to think, but too relieved to complain. I dragged my sea bag across the parking lot, already picturing my penthouse, the place I'd worked almost 2 decades to afford. It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't something off a luxury magazine. It was just mine. My one quiet place in the world that didn't smell like jet fuel, disinfectant wipes, or the inside of a berthing compartment. Every time I came home from deployment, the first shower in my own bathroom felt like a small miracle. I'd mentally prepared myself for that moment all the way from Pearl Harbor to Denver International. The elevator ride up felt endless. When the doors finally opened onto my floor, I walked down the hallway, rolling my bag behind me. Everything looked exactly the same. The carpet I hated, the overhead lights that flickered like they were 2 years overdue for maintenance, and the usual faint smell of someone's reheated Chinese takeout. Home. Sweet home. I unlocked the door. Or, I tried. The key didn't fit. At first, I thought the deployment had fried my brain, and I'd grabbed the wrong keycard from my wallet. I tried again. Same result. The lock felt stiff, brand new. That's when my stomach dropped, just a little, not fully. Just enough to send a warning shot. I knocked. I don't know why. Habit? Desperation? Brute force optimism? The door opened. A woman I'd never seen before stood there holding a toddler on her hip. Behind her, a man sat on my couch drinking a soda and watching my TV like he'd been doing it for months. She looked at me like I was the intruder. Yes? She asked. I tried to form a sentence, but all I managed was, "This is my unit." No. She blinked at me like I'd told her I'm the Queen of England. No, it's not. We live here. I stared past her shoulder, scanning everything. My shelf, my rug, my dining table. Even the stupid plant my friend convinced me to buy before deployment, because it'll give the place personality. They'd rearranged everything, but it was still unmistakably my home. I think there's been a mistake, I said. I'm the owner. I've lived here for 8 years. The woman tightened her hold on the toddler. Ma'am, I don't know what to tell you. We have the deed. ADT no Bert. My heartbeat slowed in that weird way it does, right before a fight starts. Not adrenaline, not panic, just that cold, narrowed focus I'd learned from years of military training. I wasn't dealing with a misunderstanding. Something was seriously wrong. Can I see the deed? I asked. The man on the couch got up like he'd been waiting for this moment. He pulled a folder from the coffee table and handed it to me with all the confidence of someone who thinks he's legally untouchable. I flipped it open. My name, my address, my signature. Except I hadn't signed a damn thing. It was my handwriting, but not. The loops were off. The slant was wrong. Whoever forged it tried too hard. Where did you get this? I asked, hearing the edge in my own voice. It came with the sale, the woman said, crossing her arms. Your sister handled everything, Emily, right? That was the moment everything inside me froze, not the whole body, just the part of your chest where trust is supposed to live. Emily. The same Emily who used to cry if I didn't let her borrow my clothes. The same Emily I'd helped with rent more times than I could count. My sister. My blood. And suddenly, the new lock. The deed. The strangers in my home. All of it clicked into place, like a puzzle I didn't want to solve. I forced myself to inhale. Okay, I said. I'll talk to the building management. I would not friend to word. The woman started closing the door. You should do that. I stepped back into the hallway, the door shutting between us with the soft, final sound of a life being ripped out from under me. I walked toward the elevator in a fog, dragging my sea bag behind me because that's all I apparently had left. Downstairs, management gave me the same answer. The unit was sold. My sister handled the paperwork. Everything was properly documented. I asked for copies. They printed them. I stared at each page, feeling disbelief stretching into something uglier. My signature was on every form, notary stamps, transfer records. A power of attorney, I vaguely recognized one I signed before deployment for medical emergencies, only apparently rewritten and expanded. Someone had taken my trust, and turned it into a weapon. The moment hit me harder than I expected, and not in a dramatic, tearful way. It was the quiet, controlled anger, the kind I learned to master in uniform. My life savings, my home, my peace, gone. Given away like a clearance sale item. I sat there, holding papers that said I didn't own my own home. And the worst part? My sister did this while I was serving my country. Right before the scene faded in my mind, one thought cut sharp and clean through the mess. Emily was going to have to explain every single one of these signatures. Before we move on, if you're here because you love true military stories or family revenge stories, feel free to comment your thoughts and subscribe to the channel. It helps more than you think, and I'd love to know what part of this hits you the hardest. The hallway outside management was quiet as I stepped out, and I stood there holding the folder, knowing this was only the beginning of the mess I had to untangle, but not slowing down for even a second, because the next step was already forming in my mind. My grip tightened around the folder as I walked back toward the parking lot, the cold air hitting my face sharper than before. I wasn't shaking, but there was a pressure in my chest that felt like someone had stacked a filing cabinet on top of it. I kept moving because stopping would have meant letting everything sink in too fast, and I wasn't giving Emily that kind of power. I sat in my car, flipped on the interior light, and spread the papers across the passenger seat. The first page didn't even make me angry, it made me annoyed. The signature was close to mine, but the person who forged it didn't understand that my real signature is compact, left-leaning, and fast, because I spent half my career signing paperwork in fluorescent-lit offices between briefings. The one on the contract was clean, elegant, and had one of those dramatic curls at the end. Emily always overdid everything, even fraud. I pulled out the power of attorney form. I remembered signing it before deployment one time, for emergency medical decisions, limited, tightly defined. The version in my car looked like someone had printed a similar form, expanded every section, added rights a mile long, and hoped no one in the process would question it. Apparently, no one had. A knock on my window snapped me out of it. The building's assistant manager stood there, wearing a jacket that definitely wasn't warm enough for Denver. She leaned down when I rolled the window slightly. "Miss Whitfield? Sorry, but you can't stay parked here. This spot belongs to the current resident." My jaw flexed. Of course it did. "Yeah," I said, keeping my tone flat. "I'm leaving." She nodded with that customer service sympathy smile people use when they're uncomfortable. I gathered the papers, tossed them back in the folder, and drove off the property without looking in the rearview mirror. I didn't need to see someone else living in my home from another angle. At a red light, I pulled out my phone and opened my contacts until I found the only name I trusted to look at this without sugarcoating it. Marcus Hale, real estate attorney. I'd met him years ago when a friend got scammed in a rental agreement, and Marcus had shredded the scammer so thoroughly the guy practically apologized for being born. I dialed. He picked up on the third ring. "Hale speaking." "Marcus. It's Sarah. I have a situation I need you to look at." His tone sharpened immediately. "You sound like someone who just learned she owns less property than she woke up with." "Well," I said, "according to a family of complete strangers, I own exactly 0 square feet. Don't leave caste and creed." "That's bad," he said. "Come in." He didn't ask for details. He didn't need them. That's why I called him. His office was 10 minutes away, but the drive felt longer. I walked in, and he closed the door behind me before I'd even sat down. "Show me," he said. I dropped the folder onto his desk. He opened it like he'd done this 1,000 times, which he had, and scanned each page with the speed of someone who reads legal documents the way other people read breakfast menus. The first time his eyebrow twitched, I knew I wasn't crazy. The second time, he let out a short breath the kind lawyers make when something is so sloppy it's almost offensive. He tapped the signature line. "This is not your writing. Whoever forged it doesn't know how to imitate natural speed. This is slow, decorative, someone trying too hard." I nodded. "Emily." He didn't look surprised. Families in his line of work were rarely wholesome. He picked up the POA form. "This is completely redrafted. The version you signed wouldn't hold up in traffic court, let alone a real estate transaction." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means someone created a new form, pretended it was the old one, and hoped the notary wouldn't care enough to verify you were physically present. I leaned back. So, fraud. Planned fraud, he corrected. Not impulsive. Someone put time into this. Any 12. He went through the purchase contract next. This sale price is ridiculously low. A penthouse in this building should have gone for at least 200 grand more. This looks like a rushed sale to get fast money, not a legitimate transaction. He tapped the wiring instructions. All the proceeds went to an account with your sister's name on it. I exhaled slowly, the pieces falling into place more clearly than when I saw the papers in the apartment. She sold my home to pay off her husband's gambling debts. Marcus didn't even blink. People do worse. But this is enough to build a case. A strong one. I watched him assemble everything neatly into a new folder. His precision made the situation feel less chaotic. So what now? We contact Denver Fraud Division first thing in the morning. Then we subpoena the notary's logbook. Then we pull bank transfer records, realtor communications, camera footage from your building, and financial activity for both Emily and her husband. I rubbed my temple. This is going to be ugly. He shrugged. Family fraud usually is. At least yours is straightforward. Some people have cousins who fake deaths. That earned a short laugh from me. Barely, but still. He leaned forward. Sarah, I'm going to say something you don't want to hear. This wasn't desperation. This was deliberate. Your sister knew you were deployed. She knew you couldn't check anything. She used that window to take everything you owned. The words settled heavily, not because I didn't believe them, but because a part of me already knew. I stood, pulling in a steady breath. Okay, let's do it. Marcus gave a firm nod, already reaching for the phone on his desk. Leaving his office, I stepped into the hallway, the fluorescent lights humming overhead, and that familiar Navy instinct kicked in, the one that keeps you focused when things go sideways. I walked outside, the evening air colder than earlier, and kept going without hesitation, letting each step carry the weight of what needed to happen next without slowing me down for even a moment. The cold settled deeper into my jacket as I walked from the parking lot toward Emily's house, the streetlights washing everything in that dull yellow glow that makes neighborhoods look calmer than they actually are. My steps felt automatic. There wasn't hesitation, or fear, or even anger, just a kind of clarity you get when your mind decides you're done tiptoeing around someone's behavior. Emily's house looked exactly how I remembered it. The porch light flickering because Kyle would fix it next week. A pile of Amazon boxes, even though she claimed money was tight, and the same dent in the garage door Kyle blamed on the neighbor's kid 3 years ago. I knocked twice. The door swung open faster than I expected, like she'd been standing right behind it. She stared at me with a mix of annoyance and surprise, the kind of expression someone makes when the waiter brings a bill they thought someone else was paying. "Oh," she said, "you're back." I kept my voice steady. "We need to talk." Emily crossed her arms. "Can't it wait? Kyle's home. We were eating." Action. Behind her, Kyle peeked over her shoulder with that usual glazed look, half boredom, half guilt, sprinkled with the confidence of someone who knows they've never faced a real consequence in their life. "No," I said. "It can't." She exhaled loudly and stepped aside like she was granting me a favor. I walked in. The house smelled like microwaved leftovers and cheap cologne. Kyle padded back to the couch and muted the TV without being asked, probably for the first time ever. Emily leaned against the counter, waiting for me to explain what she already knew. I opened the folder and placed it on the table. "You sold my penthouse." She didn't even look at the papers. It wasn't that nice. Tangs of crosses of videos. It was an answer so casually cruel, it almost felt rehearsed. "You forged my signature," I said. "You rewrote the power of attorney. You signed legal papers on my behalf. You sold my home." Kyle kept his eyes on the muted TV, pretending not to exist. Emily shrugged. "You weren't using it." "I was deployed," I said. "That's not the same thing." She rolled her eyes with full dramatic commitment. "Sarah, you're gone most of the year. You don't have a real family. You don't have kids. You don't even date. Why would you need a place like that?" End quote. The way she said real family punched harder than I expected, not because she was wrong, but because she said it like my service, my career, my sacrifices made me somehow less of a person. I held her gaze, letting silence press on her until she shifted uncomfortably. That penthouse took me 20 years to afford, I said. Emily scoffed. So what? You'll make more money. The Navy pays you well. That's not how life works, I said. And you know it. She pushed off the counter and paced a few steps, running her hand through her hair like she was the one who'd been wronged. You're being dramatic. We were drowning. Kyle had debts. The collectors were calling non-stop, and you're out there traveling around the world, doing your military thing. Serving the country, I said. Yeah, whatever, she snapped. Point is, we needed help, and you wouldn't have cared. I wouldn't have cared? I repeated, keeping my tone level even though the words hit hot. Emily, I've helped you more times than I can count. Rent, bills, repairs, groceries, car payments. That's not the same, she muttered. It's exactly the same. The only difference this time is that you didn't ask, you stole. She flinched, like the word had weight. But she didn't deny it. She just squared her shoulders and lifted her chin in that stubborn way she used to do when we were kids, and she refused to admit she broke something. We're family, she said. It's not stealing when it's family. Yes, I said, it is. The room sat in a thick silence until Kyle finally spoke up, voice barely above a whisper. She's overreacting. I turned to him. You knew the money was from the sale? He didn't answer, which was answer enough. Emily jumped in. Look, Sarah, it's done. You should be supporting us, not attacking us. You have a career. You have benefits. We're the ones struggling. You sold my home, I said again, calm but firm. You used forged documents. You signed my name. Emily, that's a felony. Emily laughed a loud, brittle sound. You're not gonna turn me in. You're too good for that, little Miss Navy hero. The words hung in the air. Something in me shifted, not anger, not sadness, just a line finally being crossed after years of soft boundaries and excuses. This wasn't about need, I said quietly. This was about entitlement. You thought you deserved something that wasn't yours. Emily's expression hardened. You don't need it. You're alone. You always have been. It wasn't the insult that stung, it was that she meant it, not out of anger, but out of belief. She truly saw me as someone whose life mattered less, because I didn't follow her checklist of adulthood. I picked up the folder. I'm filing a fraud report in the morning. Her eyes widened for the first time. You wouldn't. I already contacted my lawyer. Emily stepped toward me, suddenly desperate. You can't do that. We'll lose everything. Everything. The word echoed. Apparently everything meant her comfort, not my home, my finances, my stability, or my career. You should have thought about that before signing my name, I said, and walked toward the door. She didn't try to stop me. She didn't apologize. She just stood there, hands shaking, watching me leave like I'd created the disaster instead of discovering it. Stepping outside, the air hit warmer than before, like the night had shifted just slightly. I walked to my car without looking back, unlocking it with a calm that surprised even me. I wasn't rushing, and I wasn't hesitating. My steps carried me forward in a straight, steady line, the kind you take when a decision is already made and there's nothing left to debate. The next morning came faster than I expected. Sleep barely brushed past me, just long enough to keep me functional. I got dressed the same way I'd prepped for early morning watch. Quick, efficient, no wasted thought. My mind stayed locked on a single track as I headed toward Marcus's office again, the folder riding shotgun like a passenger with an attitude problem. I wasn't relying on anger. It's unreliable fuel. I was relying on intention. And that never runs out. Walking into Marcus's building, I could already hear the low buzz of conversations behind office doors. The place always smelled faintly, like burnt coffee and legal paperwork, comforting in a strange, bureaucratic way. Marcus was standing by his door when I stepped in, coffee in hand like he'd known exactly what time I'd show up. Good, he said. You're here. Let's get to work. He didn't waste a second. That's what I appreciated about him. There were no sympathetic speeches, no slow warm-up, no, how are you holding up? He pulled the chair out with his foot and gestured for me to sit. I made some calls last night, he said, flipping open his laptop. This case is a lot dirtier than it looks on paper. I raised an eyebrow. Dirtier than someone selling my home illegally? That's impressive. He smirked slightly. Your sister wasn't subtle. She pushed everything through fast. Too fast. That usually means they were desperate or stupid. In this case, I'm guessing both. He turned the laptop toward me. Emails, timestamps, transaction logs. He'd pulled together half a battlefield's worth of intel in a few hours. Here's the timeline, he said. The POA was modified 2 weeks after you deployed. The property was listed 5 days after that, underpriced by about $200,000. It sold in 11 days. Closing happened in less than a week. That's lightning speed for real estate, unless someone's intentionally trying to get rid of a property before anyone asks questions. I watched the screen, the sheer velocity of it all hitting harder than any insult Emily had thrown at me. You were deployed for 9 months, Marcus continued. They had plenty of time, but they pushed everything through within the first 6 weeks. That suggests panic. Kyle's debts, I said. Marcus nodded. Exactly. He owes money all over the place. High-interest loans, some payday lenders, and one account I'm fairly sure belongs to a guy who doesn't send polite reminders. That tracked. Kyle treated gambling like a part-time job and consequences like someone else's problem. What about the notary? I asked. The fake POA still sat in my mind like a neon sign. Already contacted. The signature doesn't match their records. The notary didn't meet you. Their logbook doesn't list your name at all, which means whoever signed that stamp either wasn't paying attention or got played. He clicked a document. And here, he said, is the most important part, your signature. He zoomed in on the contract. This isn't your writing. It's traced. See the pressure points? It's someone copying from a sample. They hesitated at the loops. Emily always traced things when we were younger. Even her doodles looked like she was following a guide. Marcus leaned back in his chair. Every piece of evidence points to this being premeditated. Not a misunderstanding, not an accidental misuse of authority. This was fraud, and your sister is at the center of it. I didn't wince, or sigh, or shut down. Instead, my hand rested on the arm of the chair, steady. Something about hearing it from a professional carried a different weight. It wasn't personal emotion anymore, it was fact. What's our next step? I asked. We file a complaint with Denver Fraud Division. We open a civil suit to reverse the sale. We subpoena the buyer's paperwork, the realtor's emails, your sister's bank records, and all financial communication related to the transaction. He tapped the stack of papers I'd brought. Everything here is enough to get the city's attention. Once the fraud division pulls the building's security footage, we'll know exactly who walked into that office pretending to be you. I took a quiet breath. They're going to find Emily. Yes, he said plainly. On video, with the realtor, multiple times. The bluntness didn't hurt. It helped. It grounded everything in truth, not emotion. Marcus closed the folder. We'll go in today. They'll take your statement. It'll take a few hours. You'll want to bring patience. I've deployed on ships that broke down halfway across the Pacific, I said. I'll be fine. That's the spirit, Marcus said. Let's go. We walked out of his office and down the hallway. The building felt different now, less like a place of paperwork and more like a staging area before a mission. I wasn't in uniform, but the mindset was the same. Gather intel, know the target, and move with purpose. Outside, the day had brightened, but the cold still hovered. Marcus unlocked his car. Follow me, he said. Fraud division's downtown. Parking sucks, so try not to take it personally. I followed him through morning traffic, the flow of cars blending into a rhythm that kept my thoughts steady, not calm, just focused. Every light, every turn, moved me closer to something I didn't want, but needed to do. When we reached the fraud division building, Marcus waited for me at the entrance. The structure was plain, gray concrete, glass doors, metal benches. Not intimidating, but not welcoming either. A place where truth usually arrived wearing handcuffs. Inside, the waiting area buzzed with low conversations and the shuffle of paperwork. Marcus approached the desk. Appointment for Whitfield, he said. The clerk nodded. Right this way. We followed her down a hallway into a small interview room. A detective walked in 2 minutes later, introducing himself with a firm handshake and a tired smile that suggested he'd seen more family betrayal cases than anyone should. "Let's go over everything," he said. "Start with how you found out." I opened the folder again. The pages looked less intimidating now, not lighter, not easier, just less unknown. I placed the documents neatly in front of him and began explaining each step with the same clarity I used in briefing rooms. When I finished speaking, the detective nodded slowly. "We'll take it from here." Too so. There was no closure in that sentence, no promise of how long anything would take, but it didn't matter. Walking out of that building, the air felt different on my skin, not warmer, not softer, but steadier. My steps carried me forward as easily as if I'd trained for them, each one falling in line with the simple truth that momentum was something I never let anyone, not even family, take away from me. Walking out of the interview room left a steady buzzing in my head, the kind you get when your brain is processing too much data at once but refuses to slow down. I followed Marcus toward the elevators, the hallway lined with posters about fraud prevention that would have been hilarious if the situation weren't so personal. My hand brushed against the folder at my side lighter, now that I'd handed most of the documents over, but still carrying the weight of everything Emily had set in motion. The detective met us again near the lobby. "Before you go, there's something you might want to see." He motioned us toward a back office. Marcus exchanged a brief glance with me, the kind that says brace yourself without saying it out loud. We stepped inside. The room was simple. A desk, a couple of monitors, and a guy in a city-issued sweater typing with the speed of someone who takes caffeine seriously. "This is our tech analyst," the detective said. "He pulled your building's security footage from the past 3 months. The analyst clicked a few files open, and the videos loaded in a grid. I didn't have to ask what we were looking for, my stomach already knew. "This is the day your sister came in with the realtor," the analyst said, selecting one clip. The footage played. There it was, the lobby of my building, timestamp in the corner. The door opened, and in walked Emily, my sister, dressed in jeans and a jacket I recognized because she'd borrowed it from me 2 years ago and never returned it. My chest tightened, but I kept my face straight. Behind her was a man in business casual clothes, holding a folder, the realtor. They chatted like two people excited about a big opportunity, not like conspirators stealing the biggest asset I'd ever owned. Then it got worse. Emily walked up to the front desk, signed the visitor log with a fake version of my name, and smiled like she was doing absolutely nothing wrong. A friendly, casual smile. I leaned slightly closer to the screen. "She signed in as me?" "Yep," the analyst said. "Here's the log." He pulled up a scan, my name written in her handwriting. It wasn't even close to mine. It looked like someone trying to forge a note to get out of gym class. Marcus exhaled through his nose. "They didn't check her ID?" "No one asked," the analyst said. "Realtors bring clients into buildings all the time. Security gets lazy." The video continued. Emily and the realtor walked toward the elevator. She held herself like she belonged there, chin up, shoulders back, an almost theatrical confidence. Watching it felt like seeing someone rehearse for a part they weren't qualified to play. The detective switched to the next clip, the elevator interior. There she was again, talking animatedly while the realtor pointed at a floor plan. She nodded like she'd memorized every detail of my home, which, of course, she had because it was mine. "That's enough for identity misrepresentation," Marcus said, "and trespass, and fraud, and at least one count of forging access." The detective nodded. "It gets better." He clicked on another file. This one showed Emily walking into the building again, this time alone. She held papers in her hand, the POA, the sale documents. She walked straight to the management office without hesitation, handed the papers over, and sat down like she owned the place. The timestamp read, 2 days before closing. I felt something shift inside me, not anger, not shock, just confirmation, the kind that hardens your resolve. "She really thought she could pull this off," I said. "She almost did," Marcus replied. "If you hadn't come home when you did, reversing this would have been a nightmare." The detective played another angle. This time, the realtor handed Emily a set of documents, and she signed something with my name. Even through grainy footage, her handwriting was unmistakably hers. I didn't need high resolution to identify the familiar way she looped her letters. There's your forgery, the detective said. The room stayed quiet for a moment. The analyst paused the video on Emily's face. She was smiling. A full, bright smile. The kind she used to have when we were kids, and she'd win something: games, attention, petty arguments. That smile dug deeper under my skin than her words last night. Marcus cleared his throat. This is extremely strong evidence. Between the forged documents, the fake POA, the video logs, and the financial trails, the case is airtight. The detective nodded. We'll start drafting the report. The buyer will have to cooperate too. They're victims in this as well. Good, I said quietly. The detective gave me a steady look. I know this is family, but what she did wasn't a mistake. It was calculated. I didn't need reminding. The footage made that clear. Leaving the office, the cool air of the hallway felt steadier than before. It grounded me. Marcus walked beside me in silence until we reached the exit. You doing okay? He asked. Better than last night, I said. At least now I know I'm not crazy. You were never crazy, he replied, just blindsided. Outside, the sun was out, but the wind carried a sharp edge. I stood still for a second, letting it cut through whatever leftover fog clung to me. Now that we have proof on video, Marcus said, we move fast. Civil suit, then criminal. The courts won't ignore this. My hand rested on the strap of my bag. Good. I'm ready. It's sense of in never bad. We walked toward our cars, each step feeling more anchored than the last. There wasn't a neat sense of closure or triumph, just clarity. The kind you get when truth stops hiding and starts standing right in front of you. Undeniable and steady, waiting for you to keep moving without breaking stride. Stepping back into my truck, I let the engine idle while the air vents pushed out the lingering chill from outside. The footage of Emily walking through my building replayed in my mind: her easy confidence, her fake signature, the way she carried herself like she owned the place. It didn't feel like a memory. It felt like something I'd watched from the wrong reality. I pulled out of the precinct parking lot and headed toward the base. The gate guards recognized me immediately. The military ID still carried weight even when the rest of your life was falling apart. As I rolled through, one of the guards nodded. Welcome back, Chief. I returned the nod. Good to be back. Inside the base, the familiarity hit me, the clean lines of the buildings, the smell of jet fuel, the rhythmic hum of operations that never stopped for anyone's personal crisis. It was the one place where everything made sense. Orders were orders, rules were rules, and people didn't fake power of attorney to sell your house. I parked near the operations center and walked into the hallway that felt more like home than the Penthouse had. My commanding officer, Captain Reeves, spotted me and waved me into his office. You look like you've had a week in the past 24 hours, he said, leaning back in his chair. You're not wrong, I answered. He gestured for me to sit. I read your request for emergency leave extension. You want to talk about it? I hesitated. Not because I didn't trust him, but because explaining that your sister sold your penthouse illegally wasn't exactly a standard post-deployment debrief. Sir, there's a family situation, I said. A serious one. He studied me for a moment. Is it something that affects your readiness? It won't interfere with my duties, I said. But I'll need some flexibility for legal proceedings. Captain Reeves nodded slowly. I can approve that. But off the record, are you in any kind of danger? No physical danger, I said. Just dealing with fraud, stolen property, forged documents, and an unhinged sibling. The usual American family bonding experience. He smirked. Jesus. You sure you don't want to transfer to something less stressful? Maybe bomb disposal? That actually made me laugh for the first time in days. Then his expression shifted, becoming more serious. Look, I've seen a lot of service members come back from deployment and walk straight into personal disasters. It's like life waits until you're halfway across the world to fall apart. Feels like it, I said. But I also know you, he continued. And I know you don't back down from a fight. It's not a fight I asked for, I said. It rarely is. He signed a couple of papers, handed them to me, and said, whatever you need, we'll work with you. Just keep me updated. I thanked him and walked out, the weight in my chest feeling a little less heavy. The military couldn't fix my family, but at least it wasn't another obstacle. I headed to the training hangar next. A couple of guys from my unit were there, gearing up for drills. They spotted me and immediately broke into grins. "Chief, you're back early. Thought they weren't releasing you for another week. Did deployment get boring or something?" I forced a small smile. "Family emergency." That shut them up instantly. One of them, Alvarez, handed me a water bottle. "You good?" "I will be." He nodded, the kind of nod that meant I get it even if I don't know the details. Military people were like that, nosy in the quietest, least intrusive way possible. We talked for a few minutes about training schedules and deployments, and for a moment the world felt normal again. Predictable, steady. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "Buyer willing to meet. Says they were misled. Wants this resolved. Civil suit in motion. Criminal case drafting. Call me when you can." I stared at the message longer than necessary. Everything was moving fast, maybe faster than my brain could fully process, but that was exactly how it needed to go. If Emily could sign my name like she was ordering takeout, then the system could work just as quickly to untangle the mess she'd made. Standing there in the hangar, the contrast hit me hard. On one side, structure, discipline, accountability. On the other, a sister who lied without blinking. People always assume the hardest part of military life is deployment. They never think about what happens when you come home and realize the real threat was someone at your own dinner table. I stepped outside to get some air, the sun warming the concrete beneath my boots. A couple of jets roared overhead, routine training. Nothing dramatic, but the vibration in the ground made something settle in me. For the first time since I walked into my penthouse and found strangers living in it, I felt a strange sense of forward motion. Not relief, not victory. Just the feeling of muscles tightening before you push a heavy door open. I dialed Marcus. He picked up instantly. "You ready for the next steps?" Prodigally did. "Yeah," I said, adjusting my jacket. "Let's move." "We'll file the civil suit this afternoon," he said. "Once that's in motion, the district attorney will review the criminal charges. With the footage, your sister's forged signature, the fake POA, and the financial trail, this is looking very strong." A small pause settled between us. "And you?" Marcus asked. "How are you holding up?" I looked out across the runway, where the wind carried dust in small swirls. A place built on precision. A place where people were held accountable for their actions. "I'm steady," I said. "And I'm not backing off." "Good," he replied, "because we're about to push hard." End quote. As I hung up, the wind shifted again, brushing against my collar. It didn't feel like closure or calm. It felt like alignment, life falling into the place it needed to be. Not because things were easy, but because the truth had finally stopped hiding. I took another breath, turned back toward the hangar, and started walking, not with the heaviness of earlier, but with a clearer sense of where each step needed to land. The drive home from the base pulled something steady back into my breathing. But the moment I reached my street, the calm thinned out. I parked, locked the truck, and walked toward my temporary rental, the one I'd scrambled to get when I found out my penthouse was gone. It was a simple apartment, nothing special, but at least it was mine, and no one was forging my signature to unload it on Craigslist. I dropped my bag onto the couch and let myself sit for a moment. The silence in the room felt heavier than usual. I had a call scheduled with Marcus in an hour. Until then, there was nothing to do, except think about Emily. Not the footage, not the forged papers, but Emily herself. And the longer I sat, the more the memories lined up. It wasn't like we'd grown up in a perfect home. Our dad was Navy, gone a lot. Our mom had two settings, stressed and more stressed. I went the military route young, partly because I wanted structure, and partly because I wanted to get out. Emily stayed behind, always chasing whatever new life she thought she deserved, but she never wanted to work for it. She wanted shortcuts. She wanted people to hand her things. And somehow, she always framed herself as the victim when they didn't. I leaned back, letting the ceiling come into focus. The truth wasn't a surprise, it was a pattern. She had always wanted what I had. Not because she needed it, because I had it. And for years, I convinced myself she'd grow out of it. Moments from the past flashed without permission. Emily crying in high school because I got into the Navy program, while she'd been rejected from a cosmetology internship she didn't even show up for. Emily accusing me of stealing all the attention when I came home from boot camp and our parents hugged me first. Emily borrowing money from me, just this once, then acting offended when I asked about it 3 months later. The debt? The jealousy. The resentment she'd never said out loud, but carried in every sentence that started with, "Must be nice for you." My phone buzzed with a message. "Marcus, call when ready. I talked to the buyer, and there's more you need to hear." I dialed him. He answered immediately. "You sitting down?" "Yeah," I said. "What's going on?" He inhaled, the kind of inhale lawyers take before delivering something sharp. "The buyer forwarded me all texts between them and your sister. It appears she didn't present herself as you. She presented herself as your personal representative, but implied you were incapable of handling your own affairs due to your military status." I closed my eyes. "She said I was unfit?" "More or less," he said. "She told the buyer you were emotionally unstable from deployment and wanted to sell the penthouse quietly before returning." My jaw tightened. "She used my service to justify stealing from me." Day. "That's not all," Marcus said. "She told the buyer you were planning to leave the country for long-term treatment. That's how she justified the urgency." A cold anger moved through me, not loud, not explosive, just the kind that locks in place and stays. She hadn't just stolen a home. She'd weaponized the one part of my life I'd built from nothing. She'd dressed up her fraud as compassion. "What about the buyer?" I asked. "They're cooperating fully. They feel played. They thought they were helping you out." "I believe it." "Now here's where it gets even clearer," Marcus continued. "Your sister wasn't just paying off her husband's debt. They were facing eviction, car repo, and according to the documents the buyer forwarded, your sister told them the money from the sale would stabilize her family. So she framed it as charity," I said. "Yes. And she told the buyer that you and she had a strained relationship, but that you wanted to make amends by letting her handle the sale." A humorless laugh escaped me. "She always did like creative writing." Marcus didn't laugh. This wasn't desperation. It was entitlement wrapped in justification. She didn't think she was stealing. She thought she deserved what you had. That part didn't surprise me. What did surprise me was how calm I felt, hearing it said out loud. It fit too well. Too neatly. Like someone finally naming something I'd been tiptoeing around for years. I rubbed my forehead. "How bad is the financial situation? Do we know the numbers?" "Pretty bad," Marcus said. "They maxed out credit cards, loan defaults, medical bills. The husband owes back taxes as well. And she thought my penthouse was the solution." "She didn't think," he said. She reacted. "People who think don't forge signatures. People who think don't walk into a building with cameras on every surface." He paused. "You know, sometimes the motive is uglier than the crime. She didn't do this to survive. She did it because she thought she could get away with it. And because it was me," I added quietly. Marcus didn't deny it. "Yeah, because it was you." I stood and paced the living room, needing to move. The carpet muffled my steps, but the movement itself helped. Every detail made the picture sharper, not a crime of need, but a crime of envy. "You okay?" Marcus asked. "I'm steady," I said. "Better now that I know it wasn't random. It was personal." "That's what makes it easier to win in court," he said. "Clear motive, clear intent." I exhaled. Not relief, just an acknowledgement that the pieces finally fit. "All right," I said. "What's next?" "I meet with the district attorney tomorrow," Marcus replied. "After that, things will pick up speed. The buyer's statement alone is enough to convince a judge you were intentionally misled." "And the debts?" I asked. "Will they be exposed in court?" "Yes," he said. "Financial motive is central. It'll all come out." I looked toward the window, the late afternoon light stretching across the room. The apartment wasn't home, but the moment felt anchored, like something had clicked into place. "Good," I said finally. "It's time everything comes out." Marcus didn't argue. When the call ended, I stayed still, letting the quiet settle around me. No triumph, no satisfaction, just clarity. Understanding her motive didn't excuse anything. It didn't soften anything. It simply made everything make sense in a way that felt sharp, clean, and unavoidably true. And standing there, I realized something simple. This wasn't just about a penthouse anymore. It was about a lifetime of lines she'd crossed, one small step at a time, until she finally sprinted over, one so big there was no pretending anymore. The truth didn't feel dramatic. It felt inevitable. The next morning started before sunrise, not because I set an alarm, but because my brain decided sleep wasn't part of today's agenda. I brewed coffee in the tiny kitchen of the rental, the machine sputtering like it hated being awake as much as I did. The hearing wasn't until late morning, but Marcus wanted me at his office early to prep. I got dressed in a clean uniform, not full dress, just standard service attire. It wasn't a strategy move. It was the only outfit I owned that made me feel like my life wasn't currently a game of financial Jenga, courtesy of my sister. The drive downtown was quiet, traffic light enough to slip through without thought. Marcus greeted me at the door of his office, with 2 files in hand, and a look that said he'd been awake as long as I had. "You ready?" he asked. "As ready as someone can be when their sibling is the defendant," I said. "That's about the range I expected." Addo. We went inside, and he spread documents across a conference table. Everything was cleanly tabbed. Forged signatures in one section, falsified POA in another, financial trail in a third, and the buyer's statements in a separate folder altogether. "Our goal today," he said, "is straightforward. We're asking for an emergency injunction and immediate possession order. The buyer wants out, you want your property back, and the court will likely agree once they see the evidence." "And Emily?" I asked. He exhaled. "She's been served. She will be present." I let that sink in. I hadn't seen her since the moment she told me, with absolute conviction, that I didn't need the penthouse because I didn't even have a family. I wasn't sure how I'd react seeing her in a courtroom, but I knew pretending she wasn't going to show up wouldn't make it easier. Marcus leaned back slightly. "Just answer questions directly. Don't embellish. Don't volunteer extra details unless asked. And whatever you do, don't react emotionally." "I'm military," I said. "Emotionally reacting is already not in the job description." He nodded, satisfied. "Good. Let's go." We walked to the courthouse, the building's columns making it look more dramatic than the actual drama happening inside. The lobby was filled with people dressed like they were either interviewing for a job or trying not to go to jail. Emily was neither. She stood near the check-in table, in a floral blouse I didn't recognize, fidgeting with her purse strap. She looked up and froze the moment she saw me. Her expression flickered through a quick rotation: surprise, annoyance, defensiveness, something like panic, but she settled on a brittle sort of smirk. "Well," she said, "look who's suddenly invested in family property." Marcus stepped slightly forward, not aggressively, but enough to shut down whatever speech she was building toward. "Miss Reed, now is not the time." Emily rolled her eyes. "You're her lawyer, right? I hope she's paying you enough, considering she's trying to take away the only place my family can live." I couldn't help it. My eyebrows shot up. "Your family? The penthouse wasn't yours. You sold it." "For us," she snapped. "We needed it more. You weren't even here." Marcus cut in before the conversation derailed. "We'll speak inside." We took our seats in the courtroom, me and Marcus on one side, Emily and a public defender on the other. Apparently, things were going well enough in her financial life that she couldn't afford representation. The judge entered, and we all rose. The hearing began with standard introductions and a rundown of the case file. The judge flipped through the pages, pausing for a moment at the forged POA. "This signature," he said, holding up the document, "is supposed to be yours, Miss Reed." Emily lifted her chin. "Yes, Your Honor. And you signed it with an unfortunate tremor from old injury, according to your written statement." "That's correct." Marcus stood. "Your Honor, we would like to submit Exhibit A." The bailiff handed the judge a packet, a page of my actual signature from my Navy records, layered next to Emily's version. They didn't just look different, they looked like they were from 2 different species trying to learn English for the first time. The judge studied them for half a second. "Miss Reed, this does not resemble your sister's handwriting in the slightest." Emily's mouth tightened. My hand was shaking. "I told you." Marcus stepped forward. "Your Honor, may we also present Exhibit B?" This time, it was the security footage, clearest clips only. The ones showing her walking into the building with the realtor, signing the visitor log under my name, carrying sale documents. The judge watched in silence. When the screen froze on Emily handing over the forged paperwork, he tapped his pen against the bench. "Miss Reed, this is you?" She shifted in her seat. "Yes, but it's not what it looks like. There's a dating with Clyde on the tatters." "Please enlighten the court," the judge said, sounding like a man fresh out of patience. Emily swallowed, eyes darting between the screen and the desk in front of her. I was helping. She wasn't here. Someone had to handle things. I was trying to stop the bank from taking the place." "There were no foreclosure proceedings," the judge replied sharply. "Your sister owns the property free and clear." Emily's face reddened. Her attorney leaned toward her, whispering urgently, but she waved him off. "She doesn't even need it," she said, pointing at me. "She's always overseas. She doesn't have kids. She doesn't have anyone. I have a family. I needed it." The room went still. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I didn't blink. Letting that sentence hang in the air was more effective than anything I could have said. The judge straightened his glasses. "Need does not justify fraud. And you did not sell the property to retain it. You took the proceeds and paid off personal debts." Emily opened her mouth but no sound came out. Marcus stepped forward with one last document. "Your Honor, the buyer's sworn affidavit." The judge skimmed it. "That will be enough," he said. He set the papers down, folded his hands, and looked at both of us. "Based on the evidence presented, the court grants the emergency injunction, voids the sale, and restores full ownership of the penthouse to Miss Reed. Additional proceedings will determine damages and criminal liability." Emily slumped like someone had pulled the bones out of her spine. The gavel didn't slam. The judge simply moved on to the next case. But the room felt different, as if gravity had shifted a fraction of an inch. I stood, steady on my feet, and walked toward the exit, with Marcus beside me, the hallway lights reflecting off the floor as naturally as breathing. No triumph, no celebration, just movement. Movement towards something real. Something balanced. Something intact again. Step by unbroken step. Walking out of the courthouse didn't feel like victory. It felt like stepping out of a pressure chamber, my ears still ringing, my body still braced for impact. Marcus walked beside me, quiet in that deliberate way lawyers get when their brain is already planning the next 10 moves. We reached the sidewalk before he finally spoke. "The civil part is good, but you know what comes next." I nodded once. "Criminal." He didn't sugarcoat it. "The DA reviewed everything we submitted. She's moving fast." Fast turned out to mean immediately. By late afternoon, Marcus called me while I was back at the rental, reheating leftovers and trying to pretend life had a normal setting. "They're issuing the warrant tonight," he said. "Fraud, identity theft, forgery, and real estate misconduct, 4 felonies." I set the plate down, appetite gone. "Tonight?" "Yes. They want to avoid any chance of your sister fleeing or destroying evidence." I rubbed the back of my neck. "Her husband? He's getting hit with accessory charges. Not as severe, but still serious." A beat of silence stretched between us. "You don't have to be present for the arrest," Marcus added. "But you do need to be reachable." "I'll keep my phone on." He paused, then added, "You did everything right today." I wasn't looking for reassurance, but I appreciated the tone. Calm, direct, balanced, something my life hadn't been for a while. After we hung up, I tried watching TV. I tried cleaning. I even tried organizing my deployment gear. None of it held. My brain ran loops around the same thought. What does it look like when your own sister gets arrested because of something she did to you? Night fell slowly, the kind of slow that made everything feel stretched. Around 8 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Detective Rowe, we're moving in now. I'll contact you once it's done." I stared at the screen, thumb hovering. There's no guidebook for what you're supposed to feel at a moment like this. There's just the reality that something irreversible is about to happen. I stepped outside onto the apartment balcony. The night air was cool, carrying the faint smell of someone grilling 2 buildings over. Kids were playing somewhere below, their voices rising and falling like they hadn't a clue about how complicated adulthood gets. I leaned on the railing and took a long breath. 10 years ago, if someone told me I'd be standing here waiting to hear if my sister had been arrested for selling my penthouse out from under me, I would have laughed, or told them they binge-watched too many crime shows. But real life doesn't need dramatic lighting or background music to get messy. My phone vibrated again. Another message from the detective. We've arrived at the residence. Stand by. I pictured the house she lived in with her husband, the peeling paint, the wilted yard, the porch light hanging from one screw after her husband promised he'd fix it eventually. I'd been there enough times to know exactly what the detectives were walking into. I stayed outside, pacing once or twice, then forcing myself to stand still. The minutes dragged. My heartbeat wasn't fast, just heavy, steady in a way that reminded me of the moments before stepping into a high-stakes briefing. Then my phone rang. I answered immediately. This is her. Miss Reed, Detective Rowe said. His voice carried that tone law enforcement uses when they're choosing words carefully. Your sister has been taken into custody. I swallowed. Was there any issue? Nothing physical, he said. But she did attempt to claim she was being targeted unfairly and that you gave her permission verbally and just don't remember. A flash of frustration tightened my jaw. She really said that? She said many things, he replied. None of them matched the evidence. She's being processed now. Her husband was detained as well. I closed my eyes briefly. Thank you for letting me know. We'll keep you updated on the filing schedule, he said. Try to get some rest tonight. When I hung up, I didn't move right away. I stood there, staring at the city lights, feeling the weight of something complicated settle into my chest. Not grief, not guilt, not satisfaction, just an acknowledgement that a door had closed. Not slammed, just closed. I went back inside and sat at the table, phone still in hand. A dozen emotions shifted in small, controlled ways. None of them sharp, none of them soft. They just existed, layered quietly. Emily had made her choices. Choices that built on years of smaller choices she never took responsibility for. Choices that ultimately collided with the law the same way they had collided with me. I wasn't celebrating her arrest, but I wasn't mourning it either. Around 9:30, my phone rang again. Marcus this time. You heard? He asked. Yeah, the detective called. Good, he said. This means the criminal case is officially underway. I exhaled slowly. How long does the process take? It depends on her plea, the DA's schedule, and the evidence review, he said. But with what we have, this won't drag out for years. I nodded, even though he couldn't see it. And the penthouse? Paperwork for restoration of title is already in motion, he said. You'll have full legal possession back before the week is out. I leaned back in my chair. Everything's moving fast. To the paces. That's what happens when someone leaves a breadcrumb trail of evidence wide enough to be seen from space, he said. It pulled a tired laugh from me. He paused before continuing. Look, I know this is personal, but legally speaking, today was a solid win. I know, I said. And I appreciate you pushing this hard. That's my job, he replied. Get some sleep. Tomorrow will be another long one. After we ended the call, the apartment settled into that quiet nighttime stillness, the kind that makes every passing car sound louder, every appliance hum sharper. I turned off the lights, left only the lamp on, and sat there long enough for the tension to slowly unwind. Not all of it, not even most of it, but enough to feel the room shift back to normal gravity. The night didn't feel triumphant or tragic, just steady, like something necessary had happened, and the world had adjusted around it in a slow, measured way that made sense, even if none of this felt like it should have ever been part of my life at all. Morning came with the kind of gray light that made the whole city feel tired. I dressed in uniform again, not because anyone required it, but because it kept my head steady. Today wasn't a trial, but the hearing was important. The DA wanted Emily present, while the judge reviewed the full criminal charges and her official plea status. It wasn't the dramatic courtroom showdown people imagine, just a necessary step in a process built entirely on paper, evidence, and accountability. Marcus met me outside the courthouse. He held a coffee in one hand and a folder thick enough to qualify as weight training. You holding up? He asked. Yeah, I said. just ready to get this over with. That's fair. Inside, we walked through the metal detectors. The security guards barely looked up. This wasn't anyone's big headline of the day. It was just another case, another defendant, another mess for the system to sort out. But for me, it was the last piece of something that had started the moment I found strangers living in my penthouse. We took our seats. Emily was already there, wearing a plain blouse and slacks, hands cuffed at the front. Her hair was messier than usual, pulled back without effort. The expression she wore wasn't anger anymore, it was something dulled, something like resignation mixed with simmering denial. She looked at me once, quickly, then looked away like she couldn't decide whether she wanted to yell or cry. The bailiff called the room to order. The judge entered, carrying the same folder Marcus had submitted days earlier. "We're reviewing State versus Emily Reed," he said. "Charges of real estate fraud, identity theft, forgery, and criminal impersonation. It is all sort of—" Emily flinched slightly at the list, like each word poked her in a place she'd been trying to ignore. The DA stood. "Your Honor, the state is presenting the compiled evidence packet, including security footage, financial records, forged documents, and the buyer's testimony." Marcus sat beside me, calm as ever. He didn't have to say much today. The facts were doing all the work. The judge flipped through the pages, pausing at the fake POA. "Miss Reed, the court would like clarification. Did you sign your sister's name on this document?" Her public defender whispered urgently to her, but Emily shook him off with a small jerk of her shoulder. She straightened, eyes forward. "Yes," she said, "I did." No excuses, no dramatic explanation, just a flat acknowledgement that hit the air like a dull thud. The judge didn't react. Judges hear confessions like this every day. But the room shifted. Even the court reporter paused for half a second. The judge continued. "And, did you present yourself as authorized to act on her behalf?" "Yes." "And did you misrepresent her mental or emotional state to justify selling the property?" She hesitated. Her lip trembled not dramatically, just enough to give away how tightly she was holding herself together. "Yes." Her attorney quietly closed his eyes. The judge set the papers down. "Miss Reed, the evidence shows a deliberate and sustained attempt to defraud both your sister and the buyer. This was not a misunderstanding. It was not an isolated lapse in judgment. It was intentional." Emily's breath hitched, but she steadied herself again. "I was trying to save my family," she said. "We were drowning. No one was helping us." "You chose to commit fraud," the judge replied evenly. "That is not help. That is harm." She didn't argue. Maybe she finally ran out of storylines to hide behind. The DA returned to her seat. The judge continued. "Given the defendant's admission and the weight of evidence, this court accepts the charges as filed. A sentencing hearing will be scheduled. Bail remains denied." Emily blinked rapidly, as if she'd expected something softer. Something with loopholes. Something that let her walk out the door and claim she'd been misunderstood. Her husband, sitting in the back row with his own defense attorney, avoided her gaze entirely. The judge turned toward me without dramatics. "Miss Reed, your ownership has been confirmed. The sale is legally void. You will receive formal documentation within 48 hours. I nodded once. "Thank you, Your Honor." Her eyes flicked toward me. A quick, sharp glance. There wasn't anger in it this time. There wasn't entitlement. There wasn't even jealousy. Just the quiet shock of someone who finally realized there was no reality left where she wins. The bailiff moved to escort her out. As they guided her toward the side door, she slowed just long enough to look back at me again. "Sarah," she said, voice barely carrying across the courtroom. "I didn't think you'd actually fight it." I held her gaze. "You didn't think I'd stand up for myself." Her mouth opened slightly, like she wanted to deny it, but the words didn't come. The bailiff nudged her forward, and the door closed behind them with a muted click. Just like that, she was gone. No explosive meltdown. No dramatic screaming. No last-minute confession of love or regret. Just a quiet end to a line she'd walked for years. Marcus stood and stretched his shoulders. "Well," he said, "that went exactly how we expected." I let out a long breath. I thought I'd feel something bigger. He gave a small shrug. Sometimes the big moments aren't loud. We walked out of the courtroom together, the hallway lights diffused and soft. The echo of our steps was steady, unhurried. Outside, the air felt crisp, the kind that clears the last bit of fog from your head. Marcus handed me a copy of the judge's order. Final documentation will follow, but this is the confirmation you're officially the owner again. I slid it into my folder. Good. He nodded. There's still paperwork, but legally, you're solid. We walked toward the exit, and the automatic doors parted with a smooth rush of air. Nothing dramatic hung in the moment, just the sense of something leveling out, settling into place. There was no victory parade. No catharsis. Just forward momentum, quiet and unbroken, as the day continued without asking how anyone felt about it. Leaving the courthouse settled something inside me, but the rest of the day moved in a muted blur. I went back to base for a few hours to handle admin tasks, checked in with my team, and kept things steady. No one asked too many questions they could sense when something was personal, and military people know how to give space without making it awkward. By late afternoon, I returned to the rental, kicked off my boots, and let myself sink into the couch. I wasn't exhausted, just still. The kind of stillness that comes after weeks of escalation finally level out. That's when someone knocked on my door. Not hard, not frantic, just a steady tap-tap that made me glance through the peephole. A mail courier stood there with a clipboard. I opened the door. "Delivery for Sarah Reed," he said. "Signature required." I signed, and he handed me a slim, official-looking envelope. The return address was the county detention center. For a second, I just held it between my fingers. The paper wasn't heavy, but my hand felt heavier than it should have. I set the envelope on the table and made dinner. Nothing fancy, just something warm. I ate half of it, pushed the rest aside, and stared at the envelope again. Eventually, I opened it. Inside was a single piece of lined paper, folded twice. Emily's handwriting filled the page in uneven lines, tight letters, inconsistent pressure, the way she wrote when she was nervous or trying too hard to sound calm. I took a breath and began reading. "Sarah, they told me writing you might help with sentencing, but I'm not doing this for them. I'm doing it because I don't know what else to do. Everything happened so fast. I feel like I'm watching my life through someone else's eyes, and I don't recognize the person I see. I know what I did. I know what it looks like. I know what it was." The words were messy but honest in a way I'd never seen from her. "I didn't wake up one day and decide to hurt you. But I didn't stop myself either. I kept telling myself you'd be fine, because you're always fine. Stronger than me, more successful, more stable. Mom and Dad were always proud of you. People always talk about your accomplishments. No one talks about mine because I don't have any. I tried so hard not to resent you, but I did." My chest tightened not because I felt sympathy, but because everything she wrote matched the things she never dared say out loud. I was drowning, and instead of getting help, I grabbed the closest thing. "I thought you'd understand, or at least forgive me. Or maybe I thought you wouldn't fight me. I've been jealous of you for so long that I stopped seeing you as my sister. I saw you as someone who always had things I couldn't reach." She paused the paragraph, the indentation shifting midline like she'd hesitated. "When you walked into the apartment that night, I knew I'd crossed a line I couldn't undo. I didn't know what to say, so I said the worst thing I could think of. You don't deserve that. You've never deserved any of this." Her handwriting changed again, letters smaller, tighter. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect anything, but I needed to say I'm sorry, and not because the court wants proof I feel remorse. I'm sorry because I was wrong, and because I hurt the only person who ever tried to help me." The last line was simple. "Emily." I let the letter rest on my lap for a moment. No shaking hands, no dramatic music swelling in the background, no sudden wave of emotion knocking me over. Just quiet. And in that quiet, something became very clear. An apology doesn't erase consequences. Remorse doesn't rebuild trust. But acknowledging the truth mattered, if only because she had spent most of her life avoiding it. I folded the letter, set it on the table, and leaned back. The room felt the same as it had 10 minutes ago, but my breathing shifted a little, like my body knew I'd been bracing for something sharp, and instead received something blunt and steady. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "How are you doing? The DA confirmed sentencing will be expedited. Paperwork for the penthouse is ready." I typed back, "I'm okay." She sent a letter. "I'll bring it tomorrow." He replied, "Understood. Rest while you can." I set the phone down and walked to the balcony. The night air was cool again, carrying hints of someone's laundry detergent drifting from another unit. A dog barked somewhere below. A couple laughed in the parking lot. Normal life happening all around me. I thought about the letter again. Its honesty, its late timing, its imperfections. It didn't fix anything. It didn't rewrite what she'd done. It didn't restore what she'd broken. But it acknowledged it. And maybe that was the first true thing she'd given me in years. I went back inside, not rushing, not hesitating, just moving with a steadiness that felt earned. I placed the letter in a folder with the rest of the case documents, not because I planned to use it in court, but because it belonged with the truth, not hidden in a drawer. Nothing in me felt resolved or undone, or softened. It just felt aligned. Like something had shifted into a place it should have been all along, not forgiveness, not reconciliation, just recognition. Recognition that the story wasn't about her arrest, or the court rulings, or even the penthouse. It was about understanding the truth without letting it bury me. And understanding myself without letting her define me. The night settled around me without fanfare, as steady as breathing, carrying no promise, no threat, just another moment to stand in and keep moving forward. The morning after the letter, I woke earlier than usual, not from anxiety or habit, but from a sense of quiet alertness, like my mind finally had space to breathe again. The light through the blinds was soft, the kind that didn't demand anything from you. I brewed coffee, stood at the counter, and realized the knot in my chest wasn't as tight as it had been for weeks. I grabbed my folder court papers, corrected title documents, and Emily's letter tucked inside. Not because I planned to show the letter to anyone today, but because leaving it behind felt wrong, like pretending it didn't exist. Marcus had asked me to stop by his office to finalize everything. I drove across town, the roads familiar in a way that made the city feel smaller than usual. When I stepped into the building, Marcus was already in the lobby, waiting with his usual calm posture. "Morning," he said. "Morning." He motioned toward the elevator. "Got everything?" I lifted the folder. "Right here." In his office, he laid out the final set of papers. "This is the last step. The title has officially been restored in your name. All fraudulent transfers are void. Legally, financially, and logistically, the penthouse is yours again." The words felt steady, not triumphant, just factual. "Thanks," I said, "for everything." He gave a small nod. "You took the hits." I just pointed at the paperwork. I placed Emily's letter on the table. "This isn't for the court. I'm not using it for mitigation. I just want it with the rest of the case." He opened it, skimmed it silently, then refolded it. "It's honest," he said carefully. "Late, but honest." That's how I felt too. He slid the letter back toward me. "You want it archived or kept separate?" "Separate," I said. "It's not part of the legal story." He seemed to understand the distinction. The letter wasn't for the judge. It wasn't for the DA. It wasn't even for closure. It was simply part of the truth, and truth didn't always belong in public record. Once everything was signed, Marcus leaned back in his chair. "So, what's next for you?" "Back to work," I said. "Back to normal." He studied me for a second. "You seem more grounded today." I think I finally stopped waiting for this, to feel dramatic. That's usually when things start making sense. I left his office and drove to the penthouse building. I hadn't been inside since the first night I walked in and found strangers eating dinner at my table. Today felt like the right time to take it back, not as a dramatic gesture, but as a simple step toward normalcy. The front desk clerk recognized me immediately. "Miss Reed, welcome back." I smiled. "Good to be back." He handed me a newly programmed key card. "Your unit has been cleared and secured. Maintenance made sure everything was untouched after the inspection." I nodded my thanks and took the elevator up. The ride was quiet, the light hummed familiar. When the doors opened, the hallway felt the same as it always had: neutral colors, soft lighting, the faint smell of carpet cleaner. My door stood there like it had never left my life, even though the last month had felt like living in an alternate version of it. I slid the keycard into the slot. The lock clicked. Inside, the penthouse looked exactly as I remembered. The furniture I'd chosen piece by piece over years. The view of the skyline I'd missed during deployment. Even the faint echo of my footsteps on the floor sounded like home. I walked through each room slowly, letting the familiarity soak in, not with nostalgia, but with relief. I opened the sliding door to the balcony. The breeze carried the smell of the river and distant traffic, a sound I'd once taken for granted. Standing there, I ran my hand along the railing and let the moment settle without expecting it to transform anything. This wasn't a victory lap. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't some cinematic comeback. It was just me, in my home, breathing normally again. My phone buzzed. A message from Captain Reeves. "Take the time you need. The team's ready whenever you are. Good to have you home." I typed back, "I'm good. I'll be in tomorrow." I pocketed the phone, stepped back inside, and closed the balcony door. Then I did something small but grounding. I opened the windows, letting the air cycle through, carrying out weeks of stale tension. The penthouse didn't feel tainted. It didn't feel dramatic. It just felt like a place I'd earned through years of work, sacrifice, and choices that had nothing to do with anyone else's jealousy or resentment. I sat on the couch, the same couch I'd bought after my first major promotion, and let myself sink into the cushions. My body settled like it recognized the space, like it had been waiting for the signal that everything was done. There was no sense of triumph, no emotional eruption, just calm, solid, uncomplicated calm. Eventually, I stood and began opening cabinets, checking drawers, making a mental list of what needed restocking. The simple task felt good, practical, real, anchored. As I moved through the kitchen, I paused and glanced at the folder on the counter. Emily's letter was inside. I didn't feel the urge to reread it. I didn't feel the need to respond, but I didn't feel the need to tear it up either. It existed. So did I. So did this home. And for the first time in a long while, all three things felt separate in a way that felt healthy. I finished checking the last drawer, stood in the center of the room, and looked around. The space wasn't waiting for meaning. It wasn't waiting for drama. It wasn't waiting for resolution. It was just here. And so was I. I walked to the window, watched the city move below, and let the moment breathe without asking anything from it. The room around me stayed still, grounded, uncomplicated, just part of the world again, the same way I was. Nothing signaled an ending. Nothing signaled a beginning. Just steady, quiet presence, the kind you stand in without needing it to become anything else. If you stayed with me through this journey, thank you. These true military and family revenge stories matter because they show how real people find their footing again after being pushed too far. And if you want more stories like this, stories about resilience, justice, and the quiet kind of strength, I'd love to have you here with me. Feel free to subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with your thoughts. Your support helps bring more stories to life, one at a time.